Happy Sabbath. What a beautiful church. What a special day. And what a beautiful people. How are you? It's a Sabbath, right? We are happy. How can we not be? Now, for me, it's a privilege to be here. I receive communication from Rhonda and Pastor Jeff, and they say, can you come visit us? And I say, of course I can. So can you do it soon? And we got in the calendar, and we are here today. For me, it's a privilege. My name is also Jeff. So I took some classes with Pastor Jeff, and we got to click because we are about the same age. And so I'm here. I work for the conference. By the way, my boss walked in the church today. I didn't expect that. Marilyn's our executive secretary, and she came in, and I said, you preach. That's what we do, right? But right now, I'm the communications director at the Chesapeake Conference. I'm very happy to be part of the team. And this is one of the benefits. I get to visit the churches, and I get to know the people of our conference. And what a joy to be here. So happy Sabbath. And I want to jump right into it, but I have to say some things before. I'm from Brazil. I have to say that. You know why, right? No? World Cup. Sorry about that. I don't want to be disrespectful with the day, but this is the time that we all take for granted. Something that other people do, and we take the credit. Imagine, I can say I'm from Brazil, one of the favorites, and everybody's like, Brazil, World Cup. I don't play soccer at all. I never played. Not even growing up. Never played. But people look at me and say, oh, Brazil, good luck. And I say, thank you. Now Americans have the same thing because you have a good team going on and everybody says, oh, U.S., good team. You know when that happened? When Jesus was in the temple of Jerusalem one day. If you look at the chapter 24 of Matthew, Jesus was walking with the disciples in the temple of Jerusalem. And all the disciples were like people cheering for the World Cup. They puffed up the chest, and they look around and say, hey, Master, look at this. Look at this building. This is the Jewish temple. I am Jewish, therefore, my temple. I take the credit from the collective. By the way, this World Cup is not as important for me as it was the one in 1994. Remember that? 1994 was also here in the U.S. And Brazil won. And when we won, a month after the World Cup, my brother and I, we took a trip to Europe. And in Europe, people take serious football or soccer. They take that very seriously. So when I was with my brother, holding our backpacks and walking the streets, and people would come to us and say, hi, where are you from? Brazil. Oh, congratulations for the World Cup. I said, oh, thank you. I was so proud. I didn't do anything. The disciples did the same thing. They were so proud, showing the construction of the temple. And they looked at Jesus, and they said, look at this temple. Look at this wonderful thing. Well, today's message is about that. And guess what? Today's message title is Today's Message. Very simple, right? It's like me naming my son. I named my son Jeff Kern too, just because I ran out of ideas. Today's message is not about running out of ideas. It's because I really believe that this is fundamental for us to talk about today. We still live in a moment that is crucial to the world, and in a moment that this is very important. What happened then? If you open your Bible in Matthew chapter 24, just go to the first two verses there. Jesus went out and departed from the temple, and his disciples come up to show him the buildings of the temple. And Jesus said to them, do you not see all these things? What did he say? No one stone shall be left there upon another that shall not be thrown down. I got to visit different places and visiting different churches, and I know how much we care about our churches. And by the way, you guys are very, very doing a good job. This is a beautiful church, isn't it? Now imagine if somebody would come a Sabbath morning when you're here sitting in your comfortable church, somebody would say, nice building. You see this? All is going to be destroyed one day. How would you feel? You might say, I'm a Seventh-day Adventist. Yay! Right? I hope it's soon. Why? Because you automatically assume that this will be when? At the end of times. Would you assume that would be before? No way. Unless we sell it by a bigger building, right? We don't believe that this will be destroyed for no reason. That is the same exact situation that the disciples had in their minds. They immediately assumed that Jesus talking about the destruction of the temple had to do with the end of times. By the way, they're not, completely wrong. Flavius Josephus, he was a Jewish Roman citizen. And he used to write about Jewish history to the Roman emperors and to the Roman court. And he wrote about the temple. And he would say something magnificent about the temple. He would say that the outward face of the temple wanted nothing that could astound either mind or eye. Covered on every side with massive plates of gold, the sun had no sooner risen than it radiated so fiery a flash that persons straining to look at it were compelled to avent their eyes. Imagine, they're looking at the construction from any side. It said that the temple was sitting on a hill, and everywhere from the city, you could look at the temple and you see the golden plates shining so strongly that they had to close their eyes. And what a beautiful image that was. And now, everybody was so proud of that when Jesus said that was going to be destroyed, the disciples understood this means the end. And the Lord could not allow this to be destroyed before. Now, the question they had is, okay, since the Lord is bringing the end, when is going to be the end? Now, if you go to Mark chapter 13, verse 32, real quick, we can just go there. And this is also Jesus talking about these times. Jesus said very clear, the day and the hour no one knows, not even the angels in heaven, nor the Son, but only the Father. I was in Portsmouth for about 6 months, Portsmouth, New Hampshire, as a pastor. And I wanted to start talking to different elders, and I knew that we had somebody with a very interesting idea. So I went to meet with him, and he called me, and we got to meet in the church. So we went there. By the way, he was not from this church. I met with him in the Portsmouth church, but he was not from that church. So you won't pick whose elder was that, okay? But we sat down in the church, and first thing we start talking, and he said, well, I'm studying the Bible very deeper now than I used to do before. I said, oh, this is great. And then he said, Pastor, I'm convicted that Jesus is coming back in 2027. And I said, wow, don't you remember the day and an hour? Yes, I don't know the day and an hour. I'm just setting the year and the month. It sounds like a joke, but people believe that. Some people are very, very keen to say that, okay, we're not saying the day and an hour, we are just saying the year and the month. Well, Jesus had to go through this when he was sitting in the Mount of the Olives, and the disciples came around him and said to him, Lord, tell us, when are those things? You can go there, Matthew chapter 24, 3, verse 3 and 4. Now, as he sat at the Mount of Olives, the disciples came to him privately, and they asked him, tell us, when will these things be? First question, when will these things be? Second question, what will be the sign of your coming and the end of the age. You see, they probably were not aware, but they asked Jesus 3 different questions. The first question, and you know this because you're a Seventh-day Adventist, and chapter 24 of Matthew is the most preached book about the second coming of Jesus. And Jesus started answering to him 3 questions. What was the 3 questions? First one, when will these things be? Which things? The destruction of Jerusalem, temple. The second question was, what will be the sign of your coming? Signs of the times. When will be the signs of the times? And the third question, when would be the end of age? So Jesus started answering to them these 3 questions. And when you read Matthew 24, you got to be aware of this because Jesus is answering the 3 questions. So he talks about these 3 parts of the history. He talks about specifically about the destruction of the temple, talks about the times of the end, or the signs of the times, and it talks about the end of age, or the end of the world. So these 3 things are there. So when you read Matthew 24, be aware of those 3 things. Sometimes it talks about Jerusalem specifically. Sometimes it talks about the signs of the times that we know, because Jesus, when he started talking to them to answer these questions, what do you think Jesus did? We call it a sermon. It wasn't a sermon. It was what we have in our churches every year. What is that? Prophetic seminar. Don't we do that every year? Jesus did that with his disciples. And you're going to say, Pastor, I don't believe that. It's a simple thing. You can read Matthew 24 and you see that at least, Matthew 24 and 25, we have at least 9 direct quotations of Daniel. Specifically talking about the time of tribulation, all that, directly quotations from Daniel. Jesus sat down with his disciples and he opened the prophecies and he started explaining to them about the times. Now, when Jesus started doing that, he started with a very specific thing. Jesus answered and said to them, take heed that no one does that. Does what? Deceives you. Because still today, this is something that is happening around, and people talk in a different way that they don't see clearly what's going on with the time that we live in. People can say this is a normal thing, what we live right now. And by the way, you can't be normal if you're thinking that everything that's happening is normal. And the second thing, people also start using different theological explanations for some things that Jesus said, especially regarding to his return. Have you heard that people say that Jesus already returned? Some people say that. Some people say that you're not going to be, Jesus will not return. The church will grow and his kingdom will be presented in a way that people will be converted to his kingdom, and that's it. Others even say that, one day I was driving and I saw a sticker in somebody's car, said, if this car loses, control, is because I've been taken. And all these kind of ideas that we have to be careful. Jesus yet did not return. Jesus will come in power and glory, and we have to tell the world. Now we say, okay, that's too much. We are here in Westminster. We are not going to go to the world. By the way, one thing that I did not mention to you is that I am from Brazil, but my wife, who's sitting in the back there, she's from Peru. And although we are neighbors, we didn't meet neither in Brazil or Peru. We met in Angola because both of us were serving at the time. I was a student missionary and she was a worker for ADRA, and we meet in Angola. And that's not fun at all because, somebody said, oh, that makes you truly international. Yes, my kids were born here, and you imagine the problem with passports every time we traveled. And later on, we came back to the mission field. We work in Rwanda, we work in Sudan as missionaries, and we always travel with the kids, and we have always this bunch of passports and going places, and we got to be switching them, and it was fun about that. But, not everybody has the opportunity to go around in the world to preach this gospel. we have a responsibility to do it right here. And as we go along with the message, you are going to see what are we talking about. Verse 6 of Matthew 24, Jesus starts talking something that we repeat all the time, the signs of his second coming. And he talks that we're going to have wars and rumors of wars. See that you're not troubled, for all these things must come to pass. By the way, the reason why we met in Angola is because we are both working to help the result of 30 years of civil war in Angola. And wars happen all the time. But sometimes, and if you look at Index of Peace today, you know that we are living in a situation where we have more wars and internal conflicts than we had before. Now, the signs continue there. He says, these things will come to pass, but the end is not yet. For nation will rise against nation, and kingdom will rise against kingdom, and there will be famines, pestilences, and earthquakes in various places. By the way, I prepared this message before the earthquake in Venezuela that gave us, sad news. And if you go for the earthquake informations around the world, science is very clear to say it's not increasing in frequency, but it's increasing in the impact. More and more people are impacted with these earthquakes, and more people are suffering. So Jesus continues saying that nation rise, and we're going to have earthquakes, pestilence, famines in various places. All these are what? Beginning of sorrows. Now, sorrow is an interesting word because it means pain. And mostly when the Bible translates pain, it translates from a word that's used commonly in Greek, which is lupe. And that's mostly everything that talks about pain in the Bible uses that word in the New Testament, lupe. But the word used here, as you know, and you have heard this 10 times before, it's not a regular pain. It's a different pain that is used in other parts in the Bible, like this part here in 1 Thessalonians 5, 1 and 2. Concerning the times and the seasons, brethren, you have no reason for me to tell you, because yourselves know perfectly that the day of the Lord so comes like what? A thief in the night. And you sure don't have these problems. If I preach this sermon in Glen Burnie or Baltimore, people would know what a thief in the night is. But over here, I don't think you have a problem with people coming to your house and stealing stuff, do they? Would be very funny if the thief in the night would send you a letter before he comes to your house. They say, so peaceful that this place is so peaceful that the thief informed you before. And he sent you a letter saying, dear homeowner, it is my privilege to inform you that this evening I will be coming to your house. I will perform my services in your home so we can have a good working relationship. Leave the door open for me. Imagine a letter like that. That would make no sense. Now, imagine if for some reason you come to your house after worship. I remember we were in Brazil, and we went to church with my grandfather one time. And he lived in a place like this, very, separate. It was not in the city, was away from the city. Very calm, nothing happened. One day, we came from church Sabbath morning, and somebody had broken into our house, started looking for the things, and they stole some money. And my grandmother said, I'm moving. I'm out of here. Because there was such an impact in their lives that they say, I don't trust this place anymore. And what Jesus is telling us is that it is going to be a surprise, because we are going to be getting used to the things. And the verse continues, verse 3, saying, when they say peace and safety, then sudden destruction comes upon them as labor pains upon a pregnant woman. So what kind of pains? Labor pains. Labor pains. Now, I'm not an expert in labor pains because I have never given birth. But my wife did, and I was there. 3 times. That's not my wife, by the way. 3 times. And it's interesting, the first time we were in Long Island, New York, and she was taken to this hospital. We were just married, and everything was exciting. We drove to the hospital. She was taken in, and it was around 2 o'clock in the morning when the water broke down, and she came and said, we got to go, and we ran. And I said, this is going to be a piece of cake. 24 hours later, she was still in labor. And it was interesting because she had all these things tied up on her, right? And the monitors going, and the monitors had, I was very surprised because I could hear the heartbeat of the baby, and the heartbeat was like 100, and I was thinking, oh, he's going to be finally one to play soccer, right? An athlete. No, not me, the baby. But I just learned later that's a normal thing. The heartbeat is always. But the other thing that was attached to her was something that would go showing the birth pain, or what do you call that? Contractions. And the contractions is what caused the pain. Now, women, please let me know if I say anything wrong here. But I understand that contractions is what causes the pain. They press you, and the contractions were going higher and higher as was about the time for my wife to deliver the baby. So it was a higher contraction, then another contraction, then another contraction, and they come higher and more frequent. Now, I don't want to call you old or anything, but just look back in your life and look back on history and tell me if all those signs that we mentioned about earthquakes, wars, if they are not becoming frequent, more frequent, and intense every time. And not only if we just talk about these things, but let's talk about violence. Let's talk about morality decay. Because if you go to Luke and you go to the same sermon that was replicated by Luke later, he talks about these things as part of the signs. And these things are getting to a situation where our country becomes more and more affected by these signs. And they're just telling us one thing: Jesus is coming soon. But in the meantime, as we can hear about signs and rumors of war and all those things, Paul tells us that we have to watch, because we're going to think that it's all about a normal thing. It's peace, but we got to be watchful. So now I start thinking. I mentioned to you that I was in Long Island when my son was born, and right on that time, that was the time of the World Trade Center attack, and how that changed the way we fly. Realize that now flying, it's a common thing. Everybody goes through those metal detectors and all these things. But before the September 11 attacks, those things did not happen. And we just got used to it. It's a nuisance, yes, but we are used to it. I used to remember and repeat this all the time. 1 week before the September 11 attacks, the biggest news on TV was about a series of shark attacks in Florida. Everybody was talking about them because people would go to the water and they would be bitten by a shark. And the thing was like repeating, and suddenly, September 11, all the sharks became vegetarian because they didn't attack anybody anymore. Is that what happened? No. The sharks probably still bit 1 or 2 people there, but that was not the news anymore. We had something so much valuable, so much important that covered that, and we suddenly don't talk about the little stuff. What happens as we go along, and every day and every year something new comes and something new comes, that we are just getting so accustomed to the living, to the world that we live in, that we take the foot from the accelerator pedal, and we say, we are living okay. This is a good world. We are going to retire. Our church is going to remain standing. We are having family worship every Sabbath. We are okay. What the message that Jesus is giving to his disciples that day is that it is going to happen, whatever, if we're prepared or not, it is going to happen. Now, I like this quote from Doug Batchelor. He says, how does this apply to the last days? Instead of a steady diet of catastrophes year after year, we start to see an exponential increase of these events. They would come harder and faster than ever before. Because Jesus continues saying, okay, now what do you have to do? Now our sermon starts. Because this is the verse that we read before we started. Because Jesus is saying to you, okay, now you have to go through these things. You have to go through these problems, these catastrophes, these earthquakes, wars, and this change of morality in the world. But what are you going to do about it? And Jesus say, okay, there are two characteristics of my people that I want to have. He says, who is the faithful and wise servant whom his masters had made ruler over his household, to give them food in due season. I like to say that this is a small parable that Jesus told upside down. You know the stories, when Jesus told the stories, right? He'll tell the story, and at the end he'll tell, okay, this means this. The moral of the story was told at the end. This one, Jesus starts with the moral. He's saying, who then is what? Faithful and wise. It's a faithful and wise servant. Who's a servant here? Oh, we all want to be a servant. But God said that he's going to make servants, because they are faithful and wise, to be what? Rulers over his people. God is calling a faithful and wise servant to rule over God's people. Meaning, he's calling you for a special task. Jesus is calling you for a special mission. Not just to be just one more Christian in the United States of America. Jesus is not calling you to be just one more Christian denomination in Westminster or a Christian church. He's calling you to be a ruler over his people. And he's saying that for you to be a ruler, you have to be wise and faithful. Now, what is the opposite of wise? What? Unwise? Foolish. Why is it foolish? Because the passage comes right after that, right? Jesus, when he explains this little parable, and if you go there, it says, who them is a faithful and wise servant who the master made ruler over the household to give food in due season? Blessed is that servant, because his master, when he comes, will find him so doing. I say to you, they'll make him ruler over his goods. Now, Jesus tells two parables to define what is the wise and what is faithful. And you know, the parables are part of the same sermon that Jesus was telling the disciples, or the prophetic seminar. The first parable is the parable of the wise and the foolish virgins. The wise virgins, why were they wise? Because they were prepared, they were ready. So the wise kept their oil ready, the foolish did not. Readiness is the mark of being a wisdom servant. That you are ready when the master comes. What about for us as church today? Are we a wise church? And the question is, are we ready to spread the message? Are we ready when somebody comes to us? One day I was in the McDonald's line. And you might be thinking, why are you doing that? Okay, that's a good question. But that's not the question I'm answering right now. I was at McDonald's line on the road somewhere, on one of the roads coming from northern New England, coming west. And I was in the line. Somebody came and said, "Do you know that Jesus is coming?" And I said, "Whoa, you asking me?" Of course I know. He's coming. Of course. Then they ask, "Do you know that Jesus had a mother and the mother's in heaven," and all those kind of things. And I don't want to go into that. But I was thinking, what an interesting concept. Somebody out of nothing comes to this place where they know that a lot of people will pass and they will be sharing something they believe. What a novelty. What a great idea, right? We used to be those people. You know that? It was my great uncle. He was South America Division president. And he, as a president of the division, he would go every Sabbath morning to the bus station where all the buses would come. And before he goes to church, he would spend there some time giving the tracts to them. Just saying, "Hey, happy Sabbath, you know, this is good, this is for you, there's some information here." And for some reason, from that time to our time, it seems like we lost the concept of the urgency. Jesus is coming soon. Are we telling people? Jesus is coming soon. Are we excited about that? Jesus is coming soon. Are we going to do something about it? Well, first, let's be ready. How can we be ready? Do you know the next year, by the way, that brother who said that Jesus is coming on the year 2027, he has this idea that every 2,000 years something important happens. And what we mark in 2027, we Seventh-day Adventists, what do we mark? 2,000 years since what? The baptism of Jesus. The baptism of Jesus, that date is very clear. We know it. It was in 27. Jesus was baptized, and he started what? His ministry. 2,000 years ago. Shouldn't we say, "Hey, we should get ready for this. I'm going to recommit myself. 2027 is the year that I'm going to get familiar with what do we know about that date." How do I get to know that date? Studying what? Can I study Isaiah and get the date of 27? No. I have to study what? Daniel. I have to study Daniel, chapter 9. But by the way, every time in our churches now we talk about prophecy, again, yes, again. Because now we have a very clear information that everybody who say they love Jesus, they cannot point in the prophecy that Jesus was the Son of God without Daniel 9. They cannot point in prophecy that Jesus Christ is the Messiah without looking at that prophecy. They cannot. They say, "Oh, history shows that Jesus was born." No. Daniel said that Jesus was going to be born there, and people were waiting for Jesus to be born at that time because they were reading his prophecies. And by the way, we can affirm and we can say, this is when Jesus started his ministry. Luke said so. Daniel pointed that faith. Are we familiar with this? We should be. Because we're the only ones who can point in history and in prophecy when Jesus came to the world. And now, Jesus is coming back again. How do we know that? Because Jesus said that these will be times of trouble, but suddenly a time would pass when an important message would be preached again. And now you can go back to your Bible. You can go back to Revelation. And you can see, okay, when in the Bible appears people talking about Daniel, and when in the Bible appears about prophecies about the second coming of Jesus. Revelation is very clear. If you go to Revelation chapter 10, it talks about this moment in history where we start reading Daniel again. When the book was open, and we all reading Daniel again, and we got so excited to preach about it. This is what means to be wise. For you know neither the day or the hour in which the Son of Man is coming. We don't know, but we are ready. We don't know when he will come. My grandfather waited for Jesus to come. And he lived all in his 90s waiting for Jesus to come. And he didn't see it. Now my parents are retired in Brazil. I call them once in a while and we talk to them. And he was so excited about preaching today, this morning. He was invited. He was a pastor too, so he preaches every Sabbath. But guess what? He's still waiting for Jesus to come. He's going to turn 80 now. And we are here in Westminster, Maryland. Same thing. Still waiting for Jesus to come. We got the facts. We know that this is true because we are prepared. Can be now, can be soon. We are wise. We are prepared. And this is what Jesus is telling us. First is to be wise. And the second thing is the parable that comes right after the parable of the foolish virgins and the wise virgins. Which parable is that? The parable of the talents. And this is the parable that talks about what it means to be faithful. And what it means to be faithful. And you know the parable. To one servant was given 5 talents. To other servant was given 2 talents. To another servant was given 1 talent. By the way, 1 talent in the equivalent today would be about 21 kilograms of gold. 21 kilograms. Let me try to put this in pounds. What, 40 something, 60, 50? 50 pounds of gold. It's a lot of money. Now, all this was given to the servants who are supposed to do what? To rule the people. And this is a very important thing. We are not supposed to be sitting and being part of this great movement and we are supposed to be leading. We're supposed to be talking about those things because we are to rule God's people. We are given information. We are giving capacity. We are giving something so great. I like when people start shuffling around. What does this mean? What does that mean? Because they don't have the light guiding them as we do. Isn't that beautiful that we open the Bible and we can see clearly how God guided our church to be what it is? To be rulers. That's why God gave us information. These prophecies are so clear for us. We got to share them. Now, these people received the bags of gold, bags of talents, and the question is what they do with it. If you go there to the text, you can see in the verse 21 that the Lord said to him, "Well done, good and faithful servant. You were faithful over few things. I will make you ruler over many things. Enter into the joy of your Lord." And what kills me sometimes is that we get the information that we got as Seventh-day Adventist church, and sometimes now we are trying to be less that and more of the other. We don't do more prophecy seminars because people don't listen to that. Well, they're not going to listen to 40 days probably. Let's try to make it in 7. You can pinpoint the most important things, but you can make it, right? You can commit people to attend 5 days. You can commit people to attend 3 days. And now tell it in a way that you can transmit that information very succinctly and you can make it happen. By the way, congratulations for all that you have done here for the communications thing. I know that right now there are people online listening to us. And very nice to have you there. And by the way, this will continue living forward. We just had this wonderful time spent in the camp meeting. I don't know how many of you attended the camp meeting this year. We had a wonderful preacher. We had wonderful messages. And guess what? These messages now, they are online. If you look at the podcast, you can go to a podcast and put in your car. I'm being blessed. I'm hearing all those sermons again. And our podcasts are being played in Singapore. People are looking, searching, and finding these messages in Singapore, something that we preached in our camp meeting, and now they are listening to this message. Isn't that great? That's how we tell the world, but we got to be active on this. Our church is streaming things, and they're putting things out there, and people on the other side of the world, they will be listening to that message. So continue doing that. Don't stop doing that. But in addition to that, we must understand what we're talking about. So if we grew up in this church so tired of listening to the same things, all those beasts of Daniel, let's understand why we talked about them. Let's get them very clear so we can share with others. So the appeal here is for us to be faithful. For us to say, okay, I have these gifts, these talents, and I'm using them. Because if you don't use them, you're going to be like the other servant. And how was the other servant? He said to him, you are not unfaithful. You are what? The contrary of faithful. What's the opposite of faithful? Lazy and wicked. And you don't want that reputation for this church. We don't want to be called lazy and wicked. You knew that to reap where I have not sown and gather where I have not scattered seed. Oh, Ellen White says we are all members of God's family in a greater or less degree, entrusted with God-given what? Talents, for the use of which we are held responsible. Whether our talent to be great or small, we are to use in God's service. By the way, my brother good saved today when the children's story. I know the sister was like looking, are we going to? And you saved it. And you might say, I don't have the talent, but you had. Great story, great opportunity. We must continue doing that. Every time that we have the opportunity, every time that we have the chance, open up, read, because the Lord's saying that we have a responsibility. Now, this is an interesting thing. Because when you continue reading, you see the part of the judgment. And this is the part that we all like, because we all like to judge everybody. So we are experts on that. So this is a problem, because we got so much used to judging and talking about how things are going, how things should be better or not. But guess what? Jesus is saying that I was thirsty and you gave me to drink. I was a stranger and you took me in. I was naked and you clothed me. I was sick and you visited me. I was in prison and you came unto me. And the king shall answer and say unto them, I say to you, that inasmuch as you have done into the one of the least of these, my brethren, you have done it unto me. Our responsibility as church is to reach out to people. Is reach out to people. Is to help people where the help needs to be. If this was an inner city church, you would know that your ministry would be a complete different ministry, because their needs are different. When the missionaries came to India and they start doing their missions, suddenly somebody realized that, hey, preaching is not going to save this. Preaching is not going to help them. It was missionaries who instituted banking structures in India. Were missionaries who started teaching women how to read. Were missionaries who started to solve some basic problems that we have the responsibility to do. Now, have you thought about our church helping solve some of the moral problems that we have? I understand that we have a school, understand that we have a mission, and it's fine. But we got to be a little bit more clear about the things that we can help the community, because we stand in a very important ground, and we stand with the talents and the information that we have. We got to help the people and helping others. God is calling us to be leaders, rulers. We got to be heads, not tails. We have to continue taking our message to another level. We are not a crazy cult that has this crazy message to justify their existence. This is a fallacy, and Satan used that a lot. Oh, you're only coming up with this because you are, you made a mistake in a date. Just look back. That's so clear that it's not possible to be true. We do have a mission, and we do have a responsibility to uphold that message and show to the ones around us. You see, in 1808, a cathedral was destroyed in Denmark. And they called this sculptor, Thorvaldsen, to sculpt the images of Jesus and the disciples. And this image of Thorvaldsen is considered one of the most beautiful representations of Jesus. It's such a beautiful image that our church, our friends from the LDS Church, Latter-day Saints Church, the Mormons, they have a replica with the same marble and the same image in every single temple that they build around the world. They make a full-size statue, the same replica. These replicas were very abundant at one time. One of the church, right before the World War, the Second War, had a replica in London. And then the Germans came and bombed London, destroyed the church, and everything fell down. When they planned to reconstruct, actually, some Germans living in London decided to reconstruct the temple, the church that was destroyed. And they rebuilt everything, the walls, the doors, the windows. Everything was easy to be rebuilt except the statue. Because when the statue fell, they could not rebuild the hands and the extremities, so they put it back together. And they say, how can we make this useful? Or we can just replace the whole thing. Somebody said, no, don't replace the whole statue. Leave the statue as it is, with no hands. And change the inscription that before said, come to me. Now the inscription of the statue is going to change, and you're going to say, you are the hands of Christ in this world. A simple thing. You are the hands of Christ in this world. And that is us today. We do have not only the talents with the message and the gifts that God gave us, we have the responsibility of being the hands of Christ. I tell you that you would get a lot of people to your next seminary, or the seminar of prophecy, if you have said that the angel Gabriel would be here preaching. Wouldn't that be a nice line for advertisement? Come, watch Angel Gabriel opening his wings and opening his arms, because he's going to tell us about Daniel. You'd get a lot of people. But that's not the method that God uses. God uses you and I. God calls his people faithful and wise and say, can you please be the ruler of my people? Can you get this message out there? Can you share? Can you make a plan and have this as part of the responsibility? There's nothing more special for the Seventh-day Adventist Church than that. We don't get more blessings. Oh, some do. Isn't that we live a couple more years than everybody else because we do have some blessings? Well, we don't. That's great. But that's a value added. We have a message to transform the world. And that's more important than anything else. Don't forget, we have a calling, and a calling to be the hands of Jesus in this world. And I hope that this is a message that can resonate in the Westminster Church today. Do I pray from here? Perfect. Let's sing.